Hey everybody. So, wow, this is going to be a bit of an interesting video, and I'm going to try to make it as succinct as I can make it, but this may go on a little while, and I apologize for that. But if you're watching this video, you are probably someone who has a curiosity about vintage cast iron, and you're wondering, what should I do? Should I go to Walmart or Academy Sports or wherever and buy a new Lodge cast iron pan, for example? Or should I buy something that's vintage? So the question is, is vintage cast iron better? Okay? And here's my dog, Sandy. Recently was involved in a debate of sorts about this exact topic, and let me begin by saying that I am sold out on vintage cast iron. Okay, which means that I have invested in the resources that are necessary for restoring and cleaning and stripping old vintage cast iron pans that I run into. Okay, primarily this involves electrolysis and lye. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, there's not a piece of old vintage cast iron out there that scares me anymore. I have the ability to take that pan and strip it down to bare iron, raw iron, and season that thing back up with Crisco and bring it back to life. So, that unlocks, a whole wide range of options for me because, I can take old iron from the 1800s and restore it and use it, or I can take new iron and strip it and use it, So, is vintage, let's just get back to the topic. Is vintage cast iron, quote unquote, better cast iron? Let me say this. 3 years ago, I purchased a brand new, modern Lodge ProLogic 12-inch skillet. And I used that skillet as my number one skillet for about 2 years before I traded it for a vintage Dutch oven. But during those 2 years of using that modern Lodge ProLogic skillet, that thing cooked and seasoned up and worked like a champ. It is still a great daily user pan. My girlfriend currently has it. Okay, she's the one that had the vintage Dutch oven that she never used. And so she wanted a bigger skillet. I wanted the Dutch oven, so we worked out a trade. Okay? And she's happy and I'm happy. So, from a usability standpoint and using cast iron and making great food and all of that stuff, I'm not convinced that vintage is better than modern Lodge cast iron. And I'm just picking on Lodge, okay, because Lodge is the primary brand that you'll run into. I've also noticed that Lodge is starting to respond to the marketplace, and I've noticed that a lot of their new iron is a lot smoother. That's generally the knock that you hear against modern cast iron, which is that it's got rough surfaces, cooking surfaces. In particular, people don't seem to like that. They think it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Once you get that rough surface seasoned up over a long period of time of use, it smooths out. It smooths out just as smooth as this vintage skillet is right here. Okay? Now, having said that, is vintage better? Well, if you're desiring a smooth cooking surface, as soon as you restore a vintage skillet, most of them, the old ones, this one was made between 1940 and 45. It's a Lodge, okay, a number 6. And this is a beautiful pan that I just brought back to life. Okay, well, it's smooth day one. All right. So, you know, to me, this is the reason why I think vintage is better. Vintage has a history. There's a story behind this skillet. I don't know what it is, but I do know this. It's been around a long, long time. Somebody else before me, maybe many people before me, cooked on this skillet. Vintage skillets may be family heirloom pieces that are passed down from generation to generation. So there's history. There's interesting things about vintage cast iron. Okay, but let me say this. I bought this pan on Saturday and it's Thursday right now. And I'm just now able to use this pan. Okay, so, you know, is vintage better from being able to buy it and use it immediately? Maybe not. Okay, because most of the vintage iron that I bump into needs some kind of work done to it. Okay, either the seasoning has gone rancid, or there's rust, or there's just horrible buildup on the outside of the pan. Any number of things could be going quote unquote wrong with a piece of vintage cast iron. And so vintage is not better if you're not set up to deal and handle all of those issues. Okay, so I guess my advice is, if you go down the vintage route, either purchase from somebody like me, somebody who restores vintage cast iron and then resells it frequently, you know, or just understand that when you step off into the vintage realm, that you will have issues potentially to deal with a pan. And, you know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. To me, where modern excels, okay, and if I were this person, I would buy modern over vintage all day long. If I were a short order cook, okay, or a professional cook in a kitchen, in a restaurant, you know, situation, I would more than likely just buy modern cast iron, because I could get it up and running very quickly and making good meals on that cast iron. Okay, I want to point you to a couple of videos. I'm not going to link them in the description. You can just go find them. There's a channel called Cast Iron Chaos, and he unboxes a very cheap skillet that he bought at Big Lots. He cooks an egg on it, he cooks bacon on it, and he makes cornbread. And that pan is rough as a cob. It's brand new, it's modern, it's Asian. Nothing sticks. So check that video out. It's eye-opening. There's another video where there's a woman, and she's of Asian, you know, descent, and she compares a very expensive modern pan, I think it's a butter pat, to like a $15 Lodge pan. And based on all of her tests in her video, they're basically equal. So, you know, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up because I'm coming up on 9 minutes long. But to me, vintage is better because I like the history of vintage cast iron. I like the look of vintage cast iron. I like that there were, in its heyday, many, many manufacturers of cast iron, and their designs and the way that they manufactured cast iron is super interesting to me, and I enjoy cooking on it. Okay, I enjoy collecting it, and I really enjoy cooking on it, more so than a modern pan. So for me, vintage is better, but it's up to you to make up your mind based on what you need, how you use cast iron, how you intend to use cast iron, on which one may or may not be better for you. Okay? That probably is not going to ever settle this debate, but those are my overall thoughts about this topic. All right? Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.